What's up, everybody? This is the RabidHedgehog, and welcome to the commuting ride of a 2018 Aprilia, and I'm going to probably butcher this name, sadly, Dorsoduro 900. This motorcycle below me here is one that we have for sale at Indian of Oklahoma City right now, and it needs a good home, so I decided to take it home with me and give it a fair rip, see what's up with it. Because essentially this motorcycle here is a giant supermoto, as we would call it in the United States. It is one that is not an ADV bike by any means or anything like that. It is a pretty much street ready, ginormous dirt bike in terms of its stance and everything. But it's not designed to go on the dirt by any means, just fully street tires, everything, just like a supermoto. So it's very much like a ginormous supermoto, for sure. Tall seat height, flat seat. Kind of a mid position for the rider. Very light. It's only like 477 pounds of all things. It doesn't weigh anything. And it boasts like 95, 96 horsepower on top of that. So it has plenty of get up and go for sure. Now, before we get too much into this ride, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors real quick. AGVSportUSA for providing us with the gear that keeps our group safe. Also, Doug Crawford and USA Synthetics, with AMSOIL being his primary product. We thank him for sponsoring and keeping the internals of our motorcycles safe and running well. And also, Law Tigers of Oklahoma. Right now, they're out there supporting rides, being part of the community, but they're ready to strike whenever they need to if something goes wrong for the rider. They're there to protect us. So at any rate, when you're on top of the 2018 Aprilia Dorsoduro 900, it's a very familiar Piaggio kind of feel. And what I mean by that is that the screen below me here is the same one that the V85 TT Moto Guzzi used, and it kind of crossed over a couple of platforms, so it definitely is an in-house screen that Piaggio uses, along with this switch gear. This switch gear matches some of the Moto Guzzis as well, like the V7 I believe used a very similar switch gear on the handlebars and switch cubes and everything. So it is very familiar for those who use Piaggio motorcycles and have been on them quite frequently. And of course, we're doing this old stop and go thing. This thing is super light. It's kind of trippy. Especially coming from a ginormous bagger to this one again, you're like, oh, well, that's different. Because it just wants to rip and roar. So on the left side, you have a mode. You have your brights. You press it out to get them to come on. You pull it in for flash to pass. And then you have your horn and your turn signals. You also, on the right side, have your engine cutoff switch and starter. But this does have modes. The mode button does not do anything. That is a standard hallmark of Piaggio in the first years of them having modes and everything on their bikes like that. They, for some reason, decided that if you want to have modes, and you've got to have modes, you've got to repress the starter to actually change the mode, which that doesn't make sense. But right now we are in sport mode. This Aprilia does come with traction controls, and there's 3 separate levels of it that you can choose from, with 1 being the least intrusive and 3 being the most intrusive and everything. So right now I am in the ATC 1 section, so that way it is the least intrusive. And of course in sport mode to get me that extra oomph and power. And I mean, we are in 3rd gear right now at highway speed already. And I mean, we're there was 70 miles an hour at 7,000 basically in third gear. It has plenty of get up and go and plenty of stamina in the engine for sure. It will redline all the way at around 9,500 RPM. So right now in sixth gear at about 75, I'll say, because these are always a little bit faster than what's actually happening. So we'll say about 75 miles an hour, about 5,000, 5,100 RPM is what is showing in sixth gear. So we are not moving that much engine or weight or anything like that to get going. And even when you're in top gear, you can give her just a little rippy rip and she starts counting very quickly. So it is geared really well for the street, especially at these speeds. You're right in the power band it wants to be, and you'll feel the front end even get a little light when you give her a rip in top gear at this speed. So it is quite an impressive powerhouse for such a small little motorcycle. The mirrors are really nice. They are actually the same mirrors that my again, my V85 TT had, so the same style of mirrors and everything. So very visible and clean. Vibrations going through the mirror, there's not any that I can see, so that is a good sign. Again, right now in sport mode, we are cruising along just fine, and the power is all there. Now to change the mode, again, like I said, you do got to tap the starter button. So now I'm in rain mode, so I'll release the throttle, and now I have a lot less response. You can see it's still got plenty, but it is a lot slower on the response to get there. Now I'll switch it to tour mode. I'll drop it, it stopped blinking, which means that it's in tour mode. Now I've got a little bit more sprightly acceleration, just like you would expect. So we are changing how the throttle profile works every time we change the mode. And it's very responsive and it's easy to get used to. What the mode button actually does is change your display and your trip computers and everything like that. So whenever you're on it and you press the mode, you'll get like your average fuel economy. You'll get your live fuel economy. You'll get your traction control mode. If you hold it, you can change it. So you see I pressed it. Now I'm in 2, now I'm in 3. Now I'm gonna go back to 1. So you can change that on the fly. There's your odometer. It has average speed. It has max speed reached and all that good stuff on there as well. And you have 2 trip computers, A and B. That's what the mode button does. It just changes your trip computers A and B. It is not to change the actual mode, because that would just be silly. But anyway, that's something I've always found funny about Piaggio. That's a different way of doing it, but you know, it works. While we're doing this and slowing down for the construction area, I'm gonna get her back into sport. There we go, locked it in. You just gotta drop the throttle. And that way I am back in the full mode of power in sport. And of course, like I said, it's more of a throttle mapping profile than it is an actual power change. On the screen before me, I have a beautiful linear tachometer at the top that, as you accelerate through the RPMs, you will see the 1,000th kind of spring up at you and give a little bit larger number, and that way you know which area of the block you are in. Again, it indicates that it will go up to around 9,500 RPM for red line. You do have shift lights just above that, and that is settable in the menu as to when that will go off for a shift. Right now, the previous owner had this set for 9,000 RPM for that light to go off and start blinking at you. You do have a prominent gear indicator next to your speedometer on the right hand of the screen. Your trip computer is just below that, where you can see what the mode switch does. Then your left side, you're going to have your current power mode or ride mode, and then your current traction control mode. And then on the lower right hand corner, you have your thermostat and where your current temperature of water is. Then you also have a clock in the very far lower left corner. You do have some other icons on the lower right hand corner as well that signify different things. Like if you have the amp module installed and it's talking to the Aprilia app on your phone, if you have Bluetooth with communicators, you know, attached to it, you'll see the rider modes or the helmets with either the communicator or the music or whatever you've got running through it at that moment. And of course you have your maintenance light and stuff like that at the bottom. On the main screen, of course, you have your normal turn signals, your traction control light ready, your side stand warning, and oil pressure and all that good stuff will pop up there as well. So the screen is very readable. We got a pretty good sunshine this morning, and this screen is the same one, like I said, I had before, so I'm used to it, and it remains readable throughout the entire time of riding. So you can see it just fine, even in direct sunlight. And it does have ambient mode where it will turn night and day automatically. So other than that, it's just a standard screen that that Piaggio uses, but it's a really good screen. Small but mighty. In terms of the riding position for the Aprilia Dorsoduro, like I said, it is very much a giant supermoto, so you are actually seating on this, or your seating on this is like that. So you are in a somewhat upright but tucked position because your handlebars are straight out. They're very short, so you got to lean forward. I don't know if you can see my shadow there, but I have a slight lean to my forward. My shoulders come out a little bit from my body down to my elbow and then kind of angled off to the bars. Woohoo! My legs are nicely tucked into the tank, but it is a little bit short. Again, 32-inch inseam. I'm about 6 foot tall altogether. So I'm mostly long in the trunk area of my body, not my legs. And my arms are kind of short, so again, kind of that weird posture and weird look that I have. But when riding, this bike is still a little bit short. And so my legs are nicely bent. My feet come back to where my hip is. So basically my bum is straight down to the feet in terms of position because of how far back those pegs are. And I do have that nice bend in my knee. The seat height is pretty tall. I believe it's around 32, 33-ish inches. I'll get full details in the specs below. But I can still flat foot the motorcycle just fine. But yeah, if you're looking for a bike that is small and easy to get around town, this one is definitely a good one to look at because it is very powerful for its size. Now, I will say the way it is geared, it is not the fastest thing in the world. So its maximum speed is about 130 miles an hour, but that's still plenty to get you in all sorts of trouble. So you can get there very quickly too, because this bike just rips and roars right out of the gate. I mean, it is very potent. Whenever you put your wrist into that throttle, it rewards you very quickly. And of course, if you take away more traction control, the more apt it wants to wheelie too, because it's a very short wheelbase at that. Now on to the actual seat itself. The seat itself is what you would expect from a supermoto style bike. It is mostly flat with an upward angle toward the back of the motorcycle. And it is a bit stiff. So when you're riding it, it is not the most comfortable for the longest rides, but it is definitely great if you're going to be commuting, because you're going to probably ride 30 minutes to an hour at most, and that's what this seat's going to last most people, is about 30 minutes to an hour. But the bike itself, in terms of suspension and everything, the suspension is a Sachs suspension system, and it is fully adjustable. You do have inverted forks up front, and it's a very taut package. This bike is extremely flickable and very easy to maneuver. It's just It's so lightweight and so easy on the touch of maneuvering. It is fantastic. And getting in and out of traffic is exactly what you'll be able to do with the speed and power to weight ratio and flickability of this motorcycle. You're able to dive in and out of traffic and do it very quickly, very easily, and very well. It's also such a narrow profile that if you're lucky enough to live in a lane splitting state, this motorcycle will definitely allow you to lane split without much issue. So that is a good thing as well. Going over these rougher bumps, that does translate, because right now the suspension's a little bit soft for my weight. However, that is something I can work out. And I know I can work it out because this thing is pretty much on its lightest preloads right now. And I don't think it has any rebound or compression put into it either. I think it's backed off to almost its factory settings and never been messed with. But even then, the suspension is nice. It has very good travel on it, and it rides rather well. And hopefully we'll get to test a little bit of that turning up here whenever we get to the Cloverleaf. Like I said, overall the visibility is really nice. We have some strong winds today, and I will say it does get moved around a little bit in the wind, but then again, this is a tall motorcycle with a slab side, so it does pick up a little bit of wind, and it does move around a little bit on you, but it's not getting tracked in these rain grooves or anything like that in the road. So overall, it's a very planted motorcycle despite its very lightweight, but you just expect a little bit of pushback from the wind if you're used to a little bit heavier motorcycle. Since I've thought about it, I don't have much problem with it now, but a little bit earlier I did get blown around a moment because I kind of forgot I needed a little bit more input than I was putting into it. I was more or less compensating for a 100-pound bike versus a 477-pound bike. So that was not necessarily on the bike itself, that was definitely the rider when I got moved around in the lane back there. The transmission on this thing is spot on too. One thing, it will be a little bit harder to get into neutral. It's a little notchy between first to neutral and second to neutral. It takes a second to find it. But other than that, when you're moving, oh my goodness, this thing shifts in and out beautifully. Very tight transmission, and very sporty too. Very easy to time downshifts because the engine and everything communicates very well with you, and the fueling is also spot on with the motorcycle and placement of the throttle. It's very natural. And the braking, of course, is provided by Brembo brakes up front on twin discs, and boy, this thing's got some good stopping power as well. And the engine braking whenever you're coming down to a stop is also very nice as well. So you have a very good, competent, and communicating package, and that is the things I look for in a motorcycle. How well does it communicate to me, and how is its performance overall? And generally, Aprilia and Piaggio products do deliver on very good performance and communication. Getting those downshifts in real quick. As you can see, it just nice. It goes right into the turn. Got a good speed going up through here today. Very planted in the turn. All sorts of power on tap, so whenever I clear, all I gotta do is power her out, and we are already above the speed limit in that little fashion. So it is very good at turning, very communicating, and it sticks to the ground. There is no wallowing or anything. Everything about this motorcycle is based around performance, and it shows. So another thing you could do with this bad boy is take it to a local track day, because this will keep up with some bigger bikes than its size. It'll definitely punch above its weight in terms of its power delivery and how it gets there. Now, I will say, hilariously though, if you're on a flat surface in Oklahoma and you are at your top speed, a Yamaha R7 will still be able to pass you, because their top speed is 10 miles an hour more. But they do not reach the speed that you do as fast as you do. They are incapable of that. However, this little booger, being 200cc more, definitely shows that whenever you take off. And I suspect that if there was a MT10 or something like that, it would be right with it too. I know the MT10s do have some more horsepower and a couple of more cylinders, but this one's got the torque and the lightness on its side. So I don't know, man, I'd have to get them together, but this thing has a fair amount of communicating and power and great fueling and just a great overall ride for sure. But like I said, it is a little bit like a supermoto and a little bit not cushy enough for a longer ride. It definitely would be one of those bikes that's great for commuting, great for around town. You have a 3.5 gallon gas tank and the odd omission of a fuel gauge. So this bike does not have a fuel gauge. If you notice, I did not mention one. You have a fuel light that will set off a trip odometer that starts at 0, and it will count up until you get fuel. Once it reads new fuel is on board, it will reset. So that is kind of a weird omission to not have a fuel gauge on board. But if you're commuting and you're in the city, it's not going to matter too much, because there are a whole lot of fuel stations all around, and that's pretty good. And if you're at the track and you're carrying your own gas, also the same thing. Don't have to worry about it too much, because you know when to add it. Now this bike actually has been modified with twin arrow exhaust in the back, and I know that my setup does not really pick that up, unfortunately, and I wish it did, because this bike sounds so sweet. Like I said, that braking is nice, very linear, and easy to modulate and feel it out. Both rear and front brake are very communicating to you. Wee-hee-hoo. Alrighty, pulling up at the shop here. I'll hop off. You do have very high kickstand, so it is hard to see because it tucks in behind the peg there, but let's back up and take a look at it. So there it is, a 2018 Aprilia Dorsoduro. I'll pause there so that you can hopefully hear a little bit of that growl. Like I said, a nice sack suspension on it that's fully adjustable. You have a fully adjustable front fork, inverted. The big Aprilia branded Brembo brakes up front. Just a nice package. Kind of show the face off there real quick. But yeah, this is a very fun motorcycle. And like I said, it's more going to be great for a track day or commuting or something. Don't expect it to do the long range thing, but this is a fun motorcycle to take out and enjoy a fun ride with and just goof off and have a good time. So at any rate, this is the RabidHedgehog with Indian of Oklahoma City, doing a commute on the Aprilia 900 Dorsoduro this morning. Overall, great commuter bike. Need a little bit of changes for my height. Like I said, 6 foot tall. Got a little bit of a cramp right there, but that's just because of how tight that foot position is, because that's very small to the seat. But most people are not as old as I am either, so they're a little bit more flexible. So at any rate, keep that shiny side up, folks, and we'll catch you on the next ride.